So we have 8 people here in person and 7 people on Zoom.
Wow.
I'm going to be checking to admit more people, yeah, if people come by. Anyway, thanks a lot for coming, and I'll give a brief introduction. I'm Alan Saley. I'm on the board of the New York Region Pathwork, one of the 4 people on the board here of directors, and we sponsor Pathwork programs in New York, and mainly this one and a couple of other ones which are smaller and not really advertised. You know, the Pathwork was born here in New York in 1958 when Eva Paracas began transmitting these guide lectures. And she transmitted 258 of them, I believe, 258, until her death in 1979. And these lectures, I suppose everybody here has read this lecture. They're a mixture of spiritual knowledge and psychological knowledge, and I think they offer some insights which are quite unique and valuable. So let's just I'll talk about this lecture, give you my impressions of it. We'll have a discussion, and then when people here talk, I'll pass the laptop around so people can comment and you can see everyone who's here. Because I don't know how to take everybody in the room and talk to you guys at the same time. Yeah, sorry about the light behind my head. It's kind of like.
You want to turn it off?
Oh yeah, I'll turn the light off. All right, that's better, I guess. Actually, that doesn't help because of the overhead.
Here, you turn the overhead down. Put that on and turn the overhead off.
That's a good idea.
See if that'll work.
I think it's okay.
No.
Yeah, leave it the way it was. Okay, all right. Thanks. So first I want to thank God and the spirit of the guide for bringing us together in this, in our valiant endeavor to do the work of self-facing, right? I mean, that's why we're here. Every time the guide often talks about this, that there is a lot of rejoicing in the spirit world when people get together and do this work and face the resistances to doing the work of self-facing. It's very funny when people talk about how they got to the Pathwork. Very often, people kind of approach it like a feral cat. You know how like a feral cat will kind of come up and then run away, and then come up and then run away, and then eventually you could pet the cat. People talk about sort of happening on the Pathwork, and then 10 years later they say, hey, wait a second, that was this. Now I have found something, and I encountered this years ago, but I didn't know what it was, or I didn't experience it. So I feel like everybody who works on the path encounters a lot of resistance, and that's part of being in a spiritual path, I think, is facing the resistance, right? Okay. This lecture appears to have a very major title. I mean, meeting the pain of destructive patterns. I mean, that's pretty basic, right? I mean, that is something that really everyone
Alan,
can relate to.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Alan, but
Sure.
Juan is waiting in the waiting room.
Oh, thanks for letting me know. Yeah, and Stephen's
Yeah,
there too.
I just got it in the chat.
Jack, thanks a lot. No, they're in the waiting room.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Stephen. Hi, Juan. I'm sorry, guys, didn't let you in for a few minutes.
How do they know he's here?
Hello.
Because I can see them in the chat room.
Hello,
Hi,
Stephen.
Stephen. Good to see
Hi,
you.
Stephen.
Hi, Juan.
Stephen and Juan.
Oh, hi,
We're all
Juan.
here in person, kind of.
Pretty scary, huh?
Wow. Hi, everyone.
So the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. Okay, where was I? Yes. Meeting the pain of destructive patterns. Now, I think that means different things to different people. Everyone can relate to what a destructive pattern is, but I think many people consider their destructive patterns in different ways. Whether it's family dynamics, or whether it's addiction, or whether it's habits, what they call neuroses, whether it's psychotic episodes. What are the destructive patterns? So the guide here brings up a lot of familiar ground when he talks about the destructive patterns and what they mean. Anyway, so the lecture, it's divided into 3 parts, the way I see it. The first lecture is about the nature of pain, and that is psychological pain, not physical pain. Talks about how pain came about. And I want to though read first a quick paragraph from page 3, which sort of encapsulates what I felt was the emotional kind of center of the lecture. He says, some of you have actually reached the threshold, opening the way to a new inner life of being emotionally willing to let go of all the defenses. Constantly observing your unrealistic and immature emotions and reactions weakens their impact and begins a process of dissolving them almost automatically. When a certain dissolution has taken place, the psyche is ready to cross the threshold, but the act of crossing it is painful in the beginning. So here the guide talks about the work of self-facing and the purpose of self-facing, which is through observation first, then experiencing emotional pain, you begin to dissolve the defenses. And when you have to be emotionally willing to let go, which is, that's a big deal, because intellectually one is willing, right? But as they said, you know, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? I mean, you may want to let go, but emotionally, to let go emotionally of your defenses is difficult. So that's sort of the task that we have. And the question, why should I be willing to emotionally let go of my defenses? Well, as the guide explains in many places, there's nothing to fear. We live in a benign universe, which a lot of people would not agree with. But on the Pathwork, we do affirm that we really have, I mean, there's another couple of levels to thinking about giving up the defenses. Living in a benign universe is part of it. But it's also true that when you give up the defenses, you feel liberation, you feel better, things work better, life is better. So I don't think the guide ever asks anyone to accept anything on faith. But the point is that when the work of self-facing begins, even though it's painful, benefits start accruing in one's life, and one experiences benefits from the Pathwork. And these benefits they just kind of spring up like flowers after a rain. You know, you're walking along, all of a sudden you see one over there and you see one over there, and you didn't really make it happen, but it's sort of happening. All right, so the heart of the lecture is about giving up the defenses, having the emotional courage, the emotional willingness to let go of the defenses. All right, allowing them to melt away. And that happens when, as the guide says, you cross the threshold. You're able to cross the threshold to the self-discovery, to the work of self-facing. Okay, let me just recap the 3 parts of the lecture, the way I see it anyway. First part, pages 1 and 2, what is pain, the nature of pain? Well, the guide says that pain occurs when the growing child, the individuality of the child is not accepted. I think that everybody has recollections, I certainly do, when I thought that I had said something important as a child, or I'd recognized something, and like my parents are just oblivious. Something that means a lot to me all of a sudden doesn't seem to have any meaning to the outside world, to the people that are closest to me. They don't see what I'm trying to convey to them. And that creates a pain. The guide says, because the parents are imperfect, right? And they can't love perfectly, children become alienated, upset, defensive. A general climate occurs, which is the non-acceptance of your individuality. He says the lack of love and understanding cause what is called a neurosis. So that's the beginning of suffering, when you don't feel seen as an individual. Then, because you feel pain, the pain of not being seen as an individual, destructive images and defense mechanisms evolve. Now, the guide also explains in other lectures that many of these destructive mechanisms come from other lives. We bring them here, but they're activated by what occurs in our childhood. Okay, so then when the child feels the pain of not being understood, the child adopts one of the three pseudo solutions, which are described in the lectures. And there are three of these, right? There's the pseudo solution. These are, he calls it pseudo solution because they don't really work. They're not really solutions. You know, we just feel that they are. And the first one is withdrawal. And everyone, the guide says, kind of falls into one of these categories. Namely that withdrawal is the first one. In other words, I will withdraw and make myself strong by withdrawing. I will not give people, you know, the gift of my personality or my feelings. I will withdraw and be aloof. That's the first solution, right? Then the second pseudo solution is submissiveness, weakness. You know, I'm so weak that I can't make it on my own. I need you to comfort me. I need you to give me validity. And if you don't do that, I am going to suffer. So the guide says that's a real guilt trip. That you put on other people. You make other people in your life feel guilty if you take that solution of submissiveness and weakness. That only you can make me happy, or only you can give me life. If you don't fill me up, I can't go on. But that's putting a big burden on the other person. So that's the second solution. You know, like maybe somebody at work is always sucking up to the boss, you know, but it really, underneath, more is going on. But that's the second solution of being weak and submissive to gain approval, to gain acceptance. And then the third pseudo solution is the solution of aggression, where you simply power your way through life. You want to dominate. And the guide says all the pseudo solutions are incorporated into your idealized self-image. Now, the idealized self-image it has a lot in common with the guide's concept of the little ego, right? The idealized self-image is the part of you that is self-aggrandizing, where you want to be envied and admired, where you create the false front that you think other people will respect. The guide says, this is interesting, since the nature of the idealized self-image is self-aggrandizement, it separates you from others. Its nature is separateness and falsity and pretense. Now, these three things, separation, first self-aggrandizement, separation, and falsity and pretense are the three principles of evil that the guide talks about a lot, which is domination, the domination of others, the separation of oneself from others, separating one thing from another. In other words, the severing of connections. And the third thing, lies and falsehoods, half-truths, confusion, another principle of evil that the guide talks about. So these are the defensive structures that we have to cope with in the path of self-facing. First of all, we have to try to understand which of the pseudo solutions we have adopted. And then we have to try to understand how the idealized self-image is functioning. Okay, that's the first part of the lecture, the first 2 pages, the way I see it, in which the guide discusses what the nature of pain is and how pain and these patterns were created. Okay. Second part is the guide discusses the necessity of confronting these destructive patterns and understanding them, revealing them. The guide says that, I'm talking about the middle of page 3 here. The process of understanding these patterns, it's not a simple thing. I'm referring to, again, what the guide said about being emotionally ready to let go of the defenses. When you start seeing the defenses, you don't automatically change. he says constructive patterns to replace the destructive ones cannot have a solid foundation before you go through the original pain and frustration you had run away from. So what the guide is encouraging us to go on a journey, often with a Pathwork helper or through our meditation or through another person on the path that is someone who we can be honest and let down with. Go on a journey to understand our original pain and then experience why our pain first occurred. Try to understand our childhood image, how it was created. And once that happens, that's a painful thing to go through. So in other words, the guy always says this, right? That only by facing it and understanding it can you transform it. So you can't, and that's not, it can't only be an intellectual process. It has to be an emotional process too. And a spiritual one, right? Because we also need grace and the guidance of other entities and the guidance of our friends on the path, the spiritual grace to transcend these patterns. All right. You have to face and feel, understand, come to terms with and assimilate all that first. Then what is unhealthy and unrealistic can be dissolved. What is immature can mature, and the healthy but repressed forces can be brought into their proper channels so they can work constructively for you. Then you have a different kind of a pain. You have a healthy growing pain, as opposed to a pain of stuckness, a pain of being stuck in your images. So crossing the threshold is painful when you begin to let go of destructive patterns. On page 4, then, in the same section, he talks about the tenacity of wishful thinking. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which people try to habitually imagine that things are better than they are. Wishful thinking. And wishful thinking, I think perhaps the core of it is a demand that life only bring pleasure and not pain. But the mature person understands and recognizes that life brings both. So when you abandon wishful thinking, you abandon the idea that everything should always be good all the time. As the guide says, quote, you will learn how to cope with the mishaps and difficulties rather than by becoming broken by them. So that's an important thing to think about. As is sometimes said, you know, the difficulties and mishaps are also a gift, right? I mean, obviously, everything that we create is a gift because it helps us understand the negative and positive creation that we're able to do, that we're capable of doing. All right. So he says that the coping is never accomplished with destructive defense mechanisms and images. But when negative events come your way, you will meet them differently, in a different way. And you will, quote, become aware of many opportunities for happiness that you had ignored in the past. So when the work of self-facing is in progress, you meet the negative items, the difficulties in a different way. I mean, many people meet difficulties in different ways, right? But I mean, as the guide said often, you know, it can be either a stepping stone or a stumbling block. That's a wonderful, wonderful phrase. So a difficulty can be either one. And the mark of a person who is on the path of self-facing is that they take the difficulties as a stepping stone and not a stumbling block. As the guide says, you will learn how to cope with the mishaps and difficulties rather than becoming broken by them. All right. So further into that second section on page 4 in the middle, the guide puts forward a central concept in the Pathwork, which we're all familiar with. Quote, in many respects, you have caused your own unhappiness through your own destructive and unrealistic evasions and defenses. So as the guide says many times, we're not at the mercy of an unkind fate. It's really ourselves that are creating the reality that we experience. Yeah, I can digress, and it's interesting because there's no Wikipedia entry for the pathwork. Apparently Wikipedia doesn't think the pathwork is like significant, but there is a Wikipedia entry for the Seth material. And I just read it the other night, and it says in the Seth material, the spirit that channeled through, what was her name? Robert.
Jane.
Jane Roberts, right, that this spirit brought forward the central concept that you create your own reality, and that this was the first time this was brought forward in the context of these new age philosophies and movements. But I was going to raise my hand. Well, not really. I mean, the Pathwork did put that forward in the 50s, but maybe one day Wikipedia will consider the Pathwork being worthy of an entry. All right, digression is over. Now, an important insight in that second section about pain, going back to what the guide says in the first couple of pages, he says that the pain that we experience today, it's different from the pain the child experienced. The present pain of unfulfillment is caused by your unproductive patterns. Your most acute pain is your despair with yourself and with life now. The past is only important because it caused you to initiate the patterns that are now so influential. So it's important to try to understand the pain of the child from not being seen as an individual, but we feel pain today not because of that pain, because the patterns that were set into motion, the negative destructive patterns, have created a state of unfulfillment because we meet life by using these negative patterns and these habitual and destructive patterns. And that's where the pain comes from. So as the guide is kind of merciless, right? The guide says, through your own destructive and unrealistic evasions and defenses. So the pain, although the pain of childhood originated things, the pain of adulthood is because we have not extricated ourselves from these patterns. The destructive patterns that the guide refers to, the title of the lecture. And until we do that by the process of self-facing, we'll continue to feel unfulfillment and pain. Now, the third section, the last section of the lecture, is about the need to give and the need to receive. This concept that the person has a need to give, which is as powerful or as important, or maybe more important than the need to receive, is something that, at first one doesn't understand, but then one really realizes how true it is. At first one believes that the main need one has is to receive. Obviously one needs to receive love and goodness and light, and support and nourishment. But as you get older, I think, you realize that the need to give is so critically important. Without the ability to give, your life is poor. Because as the guy says, giving is receiving. You give and you receive, and it becomes one movement. And the interesting thing is that I believe the guy says in this lecture, correct me if I'm wrong, that without facing the pain of these destructive patterns, you don't have the ability to give, or maybe not much. So the ability to give, which is so critical, is bound up with your ability to face and dissolve the destructive patterns. On page 5, the guide says, you will gradually find a way out of the pain if you go through it and become aware of its significance. And he talks about the importance of becoming aware of the tremendous pressure of your needs, the need to give and the need to receive. And the need to give can't find an outlet until there is self-confrontation and self-observation. I believe the guide is saying that here in this lecture. So to wrap up that final section, the guide's talking about the importance of experiencing the real pain and the pressure of needs, both to give and to receive. And as this happens, he says, quote, you will no longer run away from yourself and from the apparent risk of living. Opportunities will come your way. So as you become able to face the destructive patterns, life really becomes very different. instead of seeing blankness or lack or limit, you see opportunities and they start to come your way. So as I said before, the guide doesn't expect anyone to accept this on faith. As you do this process of self-facing, you then are able to see your life changing in that opportunities that you never thought existed before, all of a sudden do exist and start to manifest. And then there's some questions and answers that I'm not going to go into right now, but which are important and valuable reading in their own right. So that is my summary of the lecture. And I guess I want to open it to discussion, and maybe the people who are here, we could talk a little bit first and see what you guys think and how the lecture resonated with
Can
you.
I get one? I'm sorry,
Here.
Oh, yeah. I've got an extra copy here.
I somehow I read a wrong lecture, not wrong, but.
Well, I'm sure you read the right lecture, Taria. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Nothing is ever wrong, right? She read the right lecture. So Tracy, do you want to talk a little bit?
Let's,
Is that good?
no, I'm gonna
How
pass
about,
it.
how about like
Let's let up the
on
new
the table
people.
here?
Yeah. Why don't we let the new people talk?
All right, can everybody, all right,
Here,
yeah,
let's pass it. That's a good idea.
pass it around.
Who wants to talk here first? Anybody in this room?
I could talk.
Okay.
Teresa?
I haven't been here in a while
Yeah,
with the group, so I'm excited to be back, and it's really nice to be live. Oh, I see everybody now. Hi.
And then we'll pass it around and then we'll.
Yeah. Yeah, so,
You don't have to speak.
Yeah, you don't have to speak.
Yeah.
I just don't want to, I don't want to hog it. There's a lot of people there that have good things to say.
yeah. So when I read this lecture, just the title, Destructive Patterns, I've been doing the transformation program, so I've been doing a lot of this hands-on for a couple of years. And what immediately came to mind was I recently discovered this thinking pattern that I had where I would come to a place and then I would have this thought and then I would withhold because the thought was I can't do that for whatever reason. So then when I realized I was doing it like all the time.
That's so common.
Yeah. Like I can't do that. I can't. So it was a withholding love. So I always used to think personality type was the aloof with
The pseudo solution.
yeah, the pseudo solution. But then I realized, with all the work I've been doing, I know my pseudo solution is aggression because it's the will type, and I'll use all the other ones to get what I want. So it's kind of interesting, that whole thing with the destructive patterns. So I'm really kind of tuned into all of that right now. And I am noticing new ones as as I move further down. But there was just a couple of things that struck me. One of them was the idea that it could take a lot of lifetimes because I can get really frustrated. I mean, I've been reading the lectures since the 90s. And I used to say, where's the transformation? Because I'd be working so hard and I didn't feel like anything was ever changing. But now I can't say that anymore because I had some really major breakthroughs last year and, through the TP program. But then the guide also says, be careful that you don't fall back and then you have to start over again, so I can catch myself doing that. So, but yeah, this lecture, really resonated with me and everything Alan was saying about, I've recently experienced also the feeling of giving and receiving being the same thing. I've had that where I'm just like, oh, it's really, and I think it is as you get older as well. But yeah, let me just see if I did take a lot of notes with this. I really like this lecture. I don't think I have read it recently, at least, or maybe ever. I don't know. The whole thing of the pressure and the pain. I think that was in the context of like, it's almost like the difference between the hard pain and the soft pain. So
Yeah.
you feel that tension is the hard pain because It's like not allowing, when you hold back the emotion. So for me, I was really repressed, as I guess many people are, but so just learning to not hold the hard pain and just allow the soft pain is not, and the guide even says it's not as bad as the pattern that you set up. So the hard pain is so much worse than the soft pain. So anyway, really, really a good lecture. So I'm going to pass it on to whoever
Whoever wants
wants
to
to speak next.
Joel, or do you want to say something?
I'll say something.
Okay.
First of all, here is hi, Patricia, the person that really referred me to the program.
Oh,
So I really like that very much. Really enjoy that, and it's amazing. So many things come to mind, but just a question. I mean, you mentioned about the immature emotions, and clearly, I mean, emotions are part of our humanity, and obviously, maybe rather than getting rid of that or maybe just question of definitions is our ability to make them mature. Yes.
I think so.
To make them mature and to grow, to be able to process things in a healthy way, because it's all to me as kind of having kind of a balance. Yes, a
Yeah,
balanced respond.
I think that's encapsulated in the idea that you can accept that life will bring, pain and pleasure.
Yes.
You don't have to insist. The immature emotion always just wants the one thing, pleasure, right?
Yeah.
Maturity means you can accept both.
Yes. And one question that I have, and maybe touching about this ability, this desire to give and receive. If I understand correctly, I mean, it's written that in order for you to give, you first have to receive, or maybe to fulfill that. Can you explain more about that aspect?
About giving and receiving?
Yes.
Well,
We can take that.
I would say that giving means, I think, to first have the courage to begin the path of self-facing, self-confrontation, because I think the fundamental giving is truth. I mean, what can be more giving than truthfulness? And to be truthful with others, you have to be truthful with yourself, which means you have to understand your destructive patterns, come to terms with your needs. As the guide says, they're real and false needs. Some needs are real, some needs are false. So I think that, as Hamlet said, or was it Polonius, if you're to thine own self be true, and then thou canst not be false to any man. So I think the first fundamental beginning of giving is to be honest and truthful with yourself. And then also I think that, this is sort of a paradoxical thing, but in the Pathwork, the giving is the expression of negativity in many cases, because most people, when they relate to others, they hide it, they repress it. But if you're able to be out front about your negativity, you're giving a gift and you're making yourself vulnerable. You're saying, I'm not perfect. Matter of fact, I have this feeling towards you. I've got this irrational judgment of you. And that is a giving, because that is truthful. So that's, yeah, it's so interesting, because when you reveal the depths of your negativity and your destructiveness, you give other people a great gift. Because what it does is also defangs you. If you admit that, then you're not threatening anymore. There's nothing hidden underneath where you're trying to hurt another person. So by being honest about your negativity, paradoxically, I think that's a great act of giving. As we say, you own up to it. You don't act out negativity, you own it. You admit it, you confront it. Yeah, so does that, giving, you have to be honest with yourself, because often giving is not honest, right? It's typical that people give out of a sense of obligation very often, right? You don't really want to give, but you're obligated. So you give in a half-hearted way. Maybe you send somebody $50 when you really should go and see them. So the giving, you have to be honest about if you want to give. Being honest, I think if you admit how, in the ways you don't want to give, then you're being very honest and then you're giving, paradoxically, as it may seem.
Right, but you cannot really necessarily like say it out, like,
Correct.
I'm giving this to you, but I don't really want to give it.
Well, see,
to them.
that's
It's like,
why
well,
you're on camera now. No, that's why. That's why we have to do this in the context of people who are in the path of self-facing, who can understand that there are the multiple levels of play, right? You don't want to, for some people, you cannot approach this level of giving them negativity. They will take it the wrong way.
Probably the ideal place, the giving and the receiving are one.
Yes.
Yes, well, that's
So the moment that you give, you receive yourself, and it's like it's almost hard to separate.
It is. That's what.
So that's the balance.
Yeah, the Pathwork says over and over again that giving and receiving are simply
The same.
it's just different ends of the same energy current, which is
Yes.
going in a circle like this. So it's not even different ends, different.
It's like in the balance.
Yeah.
In the balance.
so it's,
where it's
Could I say
continuing.
something?
Yeah, here.
Hey, Joel.
So, hi, everybody. So for me, giving is a process, right? So we have the ideal in our mind of how we would like to be towards other people, right? And how you think to express sharing, giving. And I remember when my mother was living at home and she had 24-hour care and she couldn't speak very well and had trouble walking. And my father was there and caring for her along with the caregivers. And I made it a point to go and see her once a week. And I remember that I was very conflicted because it was painful to see her deteriorating and not as I wanted to think of her, right? But I would force myself to go because I wanted to share the burden with my father, who was really, he was there every single day. And every time that I would leave, I was happy that I was pleased with myself that I had that fulfilled what I felt was my obligation. And surely, I didn't know how much time I would have with her. And so I was able to, enjoy being her son, even though at this point I was more the adult than the child, if you will, because she needed me. And so it was a process that I observed over time that as I did it, I became more stretched out and it became a little bit easier, although it did remain difficult. So sometimes the process of giving is that we do have this ideal in the future of how we would like to be, and we're not there yet, but we practice, right? And then we acknowledge our resistance and care for that part as well, not to ignore the part that says, oh my God, this is the last place I really want to go right now is to go and do this thing. And so, to respect that. And what I've noticed over time is that my ability to share myself in a giving way is expanded. And then when there is difficulty, and there still is resistance, I respect that and say, okay, so this is an area that I need to develop and to become more open with myself.
Nancy, can I put you on the spot?
Please, let's see what happens. I thought the lecture was very powerful, and the giving and the receiving is something I need to do a lot of work on. And I've come across a pattern of self-facing, of really wanting to be taken care of like a baby. And it's kind of wreaking havoc in my life. And so this lecture is really helpful because it talks about facing it and then helping mature that feeling into something that isn't so demanding. So that's what I have to say.
I'm gonna let everybody on there.
So everyone would someone from the ether like to weigh in?
Yeah, I saw Kevin's hand go up.
Oh, go ahead. I think you should unmute yourselves.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, go
Is
ahead.
that okay? Okay, so to the original questioner, hi. I just wanted to kind of also reply to this giving. Tracy mentioned the one energy current. And I think it's kind of a really helpful concept, at least for me, to keep in mind throughout my journey, because that's something that really never changes, this concept of that it's a link in the chain. The guide talks about this very early on in lecture number 2. And that link in the chain, to me, it kind of symbolizes for me that the link is, it both goes out into the next link and comes back. Okay, one link both goes out and comes back. And every time you put yourself into the flow of that energy current of non-isolation or opposite of withdrawal, you are putting yourself out there in any manner, and any manner is a manner of being present. And that presence is probably the greatest gift to so many that you can give without making a conscious ego act of, oh, I'm going to give here. Okay, it's just being, in many ways for a lot of us, just being available and just being open to receive other people where they are at, because and receive yourself as well, because in that process of receiving where they are at or where you are at, you're giving them that opportunity to be connected to you as well. So that's what I wanted to share.
Good point. I completely agree with that. That kind of reminds me of the miracle of the loaves and the fishes, really. Now, Jesus is there with the disciples, and what are they offering? They're just offering themselves. All of a sudden, it's enough for everyone.
Right, precisely. It multiplies tremendously.
And often when you, like, I work for a labor union, and all those guys have problems, but you know, it's really just somebody on the phone, and they solve their own problems.
The best counselors do that, yes.
Kay.
Hi, I'm just going to go back. I love this discussion on giving and receiving, but I want to go back to where in the beginning of the lecture, where he was talking about the pseudo defenses, or however we protect ourselves. I protect myself by aggression and even domination. And the reason I'm saying it now is because today I was looking at something on YouTube or whatever about narcissism. And there was this guy who was like the total narcissist in the world, whatever. And they were all talking about him. And all of a sudden they used the word discard, that what he does, by the way, he's running for the mayor of London. But in any case, what he does is discard people like that. Just that's it, you're done, and never talk to them again. And oh my God, I said, oh my God, I didn't know I was a narcissist. I always thought I was not a narcissist. I have them in my family. I know them well. So I got this real pain that said, oh, look, I don't know who I am. I didn't know that's going on. Well, it has got, I'm not a narcissist, but there are 3 times in my life when I consciously, I'm talking about this because we're talking about, I guess, making amends. In a way, I made amends today because of at least one of the times I did this. But in any case, 3 times in my life, I literally, once when I was only about 9 years old, once when I was about 25, and then one a couple of years after that. And then, thank God, I don't think I've done it again. But I literally discarded one male I was with for a number of years, like 3 years at least. And a little girl, my friend that I was growing up with. And interestingly enough, they cared about me. They really did care. And then my other friend was my best girlfriend growing up. Anyway. And I literally was able to, because of my pain, because of my own injuries, I was able to just say, I'm done with this. I'm done with it. It's over. And whatever, and not in a nice way. I was very conscious. I guess in a way I have to admit it was probably sadistic, because in fact, when it was the man that I was with for a number of years, he said to me, "Do you know that you're smiling when you're telling me this?" Of course, I didn't know it, but anyway, I'm making a confession here. But the other part of it that I think is really good is that in the lecture, it was a wonderful lecture. In the lecture, he says that, it's really, you don't have to go back there again, although I did go back and ask my friend for forgiveness. But you don't have to, because what's happening with me is that I still do it without being so nasty and horrible, hopefully. I keep people away. I'm just getting myself ready to, I don't have to do it anymore because I keep people at a distance. That's what I'm saying. So this is present in present life, and how it has, as the guide says, set you up so that you created your life where, I continue having it happen. So long story to say that was really, really good for me to learn that at present time, there's something I can do about it. There's something I can wake up to that I have been carrying for a long time. So thank you. And I knew I was going to share this with you. It's so funny that if it, whatever reason, but I'm really grateful to be able to share it, So thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
I don't know how to take one of those pictures and make it.
Oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
That would help us, right?
Yeah, because I think often people feel like they're trapped by childhood trauma, right? And the guide kind of says, hey, guess what? It's really not that way. It is about today, how those traumas have created something that is self-sustaining now, right? It's the patterns that continue that to be perpetuated.
Yeah, thank you, Kay, for sharing that. That was tremendous. It's very helpful too.
Anybody else want to share some insights about the lecture?
Hi, Stephen here. Thank you, Alan. That was really good. Great summation on it. I was reading the lecture today, and I guess it's a little hard for me to stay focused. And after page 2, I start to lose focus. So your summary was superb. And clearly, I mean, my life is very clear to me now. And certainly withdrawal is the way I seem to operate. I'm actually vaccinated. I'm not with you guys because I'm in Florida. But withdrawal, it's very interesting because I would think, well, yeah, because of my early childhood drama, I'm still suffering from this withdrawal, and I withdraw from people. And my whole life has been withdrawal. I've been very nomadic and traveling, and it was very good and very exciting. And I lived in different countries, and it was very lucrative, and on and on and on. But there was a sense of loneliness there, a tragic loneliness. You'd wake up 4 a.m. and wonder, like, what's all this about, Alfie? And people would reach out to me, but I always had some excuse. I have to leave. I'm leaving tomorrow. I'd love to see you. When I come back, we'll get together. And I knew that was all bullshit anyway. I was just saying it so I can escape. And, after being with somebody an hour or 2 or 3, oh God, 3 hours with one person, there'd be a little voice in my head that would say, okay, let's get out of here. It's enough of this. So, in terms of giving and receiving, there really wasn't any giving and receiving. It was more like surviving than giving and receiving. That was my primary need. And I always felt like I could survive, and I have. I've survived quite well. And of course, now I'm living with somebody down here, and it's a bit different. But I always felt I can handle it, and I did handle it, and I still am handling it, whatever handling means. However, it's starting as I get older, and I am getting older. I don't have the energy that I used to have. I don't have the courage that I used to have, nor the passion, frankly. So, I think originally it was like isolated on a nice big island and no problem. And the ships come by and want to save me. And I say, hey, you're like, fuck off. I don't need you. I really don't want you. And they say, okay, no problem. We'll keep sailing. And I can handle it. And I did, and I did, and I did. And of course, now I'm coming up to a ripe old age. And fortunately, I'm still healthy. But that island is getting smaller and smaller. And the ocean is encroaching on me from all sides. And I'm wondering whether those ships are still interested in me, or did I just kick them away? Or even if they were willing to save me, whether I'd still even be open to be saved by them, or I'd rather just handle my own demise quietly by myself. I don't know. So it was a very deep and profound lecture. And certainly withdrawal. And I do agree, I can understand, I can go back and experience the pain, the initial trauma or traumas in my life that caused me to withdraw. And I withdrew at a very early age and say, these people are really nuts. I've got to get out of here. And the only way I'm ever going to get out of here is be self-sufficient and secure and let nobody and nothing touch me. And I did that. I was very successful in that. And, however, the original trauma is not the problem. It's my continued need to withdraw. And it happened even today. I'm in another group, and people seem to actually like me in spite of it all, which I find astonishing. And I was in another group, and I completely, at the end, I was creating a letter, an email in my head to the group. It was only about 3 or 4 of us down here in Florida, of how I'm going to leave them. And half the day was spent in this letter of how I was going to leave them, as opposed to how I can enhance the group. And I actually, now I'm able to just witness it and not really delve into the negatives and just send the letter out. And one day I may, before the next group, which is next Thursday, I may send the letter out. But meanwhile, I can live with it in my mind and just watch it all and say, that's pretty amazing, Stephen. You're on this island and it's getting smaller and smaller. And there are people out there that are willing to throw you, a life preserver. And you're coming up half the day with how you're going to reject that life preserver. It's quite amazing. So it's very apropos and very timely. And thank you again, Alan. You and everybody, it's really given me some insight. And where do I go with that? I don't know. It's very powerful, these defenses. And you don't know you have defenses because if you're born with glasses that are green, your whole life you think everything is green. So you don't know to take the glasses off and say, wow, hey, life is great. You know what? So here I am down in Florida in the middle of really nowhere. And I talk to trees, which always seem to have an answer of some kind. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Steve.
That's a very deep metaphor about the island and the ocean encroaching.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
Very deep, interesting metaphor. I'm going to think about that, meditate on that.
Thank you.
Friends.
Just say a little bit. Am I allowed?
Go ahead, Juan.
Anyone? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you, Alan. Also, making the small outline of the entire lecture. I mean, it's just great, as Stephen was saying. Thank you very much. And truly, this is a great lecture. As most of them, it resonates with me very deeply. There is so much to talk about this lecture. I mean, I don't know where to begin, to be honest, but stop me if I'm talking too much. But Well, first of all, I want to touch base a little bit on the giving and receiving subject, which I very much resonate with that. And of course, Jesus is my hero. I want to start with that. When he said there is more joy in giving than in receiving, and to me, it's almost like one and the same thing, to be honest, because when you give, you receive, and when you receive, you are given. When you give somebody, yeah, you give the object or the love or whatever it is that you give, that person is happy because he's receiving that. But also when you receive from someone, you are also giving them the joy of having given you that. And I mean, to me, it's great when you give something and you see the smile, the joy that you bring in that person when you give whatever it is that you give. So it's really, to me, it's almost really the same thing, giving and receiving. So as Tracy was saying, it's just one single current that in this world of duality appears differently. So that's one thing I wanted to mention, and I wanted to also comment to the beginning of the lecture about the the pseudo solutions or escapes, and it's very interesting that I observed very clearly in my parents, in my mother and my father, how my mother was the submissive type, and she will play the victim and control, and basically was a tyrant in that way. Just she will control by submissiveness, while my father on the other hand was the aggressive type, that dictator that goes out there and that's what he needs to do to get what he wants, and will really not hold anything to really aggressively get what he wants. So my father was openly aggressive, and my mother, on the other hand, was openly submissive, as far as I could observe. Well, now that I read Pathwork, I understood, but perhaps not then entirely. But it's interesting how I, on the other hand, assume, like Stephen, I adopted the position of withdrawal. So I guess from seeing these characters that I could not quite understand, on the other hand, I fear my father. And on the other hand, on one hand, I fear my father. On the other hand, I kind of felt sorry for my mother. I seeing her all like miserable and unhappy, and really never seemed to be content with anything. So I guess out of that, I got my way of escaping by just withdrawing, and just like I don't want to to be around anybody. I just wanted to kind of like withdraw, and then whenever things will not go my way, then I would just adopt these withdrawals. Like, okay, never mind, I just go away from this, and I don't have to deal with this. Why? I don't have to have this person in my life. I just deal with it on my own. So so that's one point that I wanted to mention there, and then I'm just going to go back quickly, really, to page 3 to emphasize my point here. I would like to read 1, 2, 3, the third paragraph, and actually you read some of it, Alan, but I'm just going to read the end of it and just try to make my point here as quickly as I can. In the middle of this paragraph, number 3, on page 3, that is, the guy says, and this is very interesting to me because one of the things that happens to me anyway, or I think, well, I'm just going to speak for myself, how we think that, it's like, okay, so, there's reincarnations and I don't have to deal with this now, and I don't have to deal with this. I can deal with this later, even in this lifetime, or perhaps in another lifetime. But what the guy says here really resonated with me very much, because he says, the longer you delay this painful process, the more difficult is it bound to be when you are finally ready to pass from childhood into adulthood. Even if you died in this life as a child, at one period or another of your spiritual development, this threshold has to be crossed. The pain is a healthy growing pain, and the light is in sight when you overcome your resistance to the process. The strength, the self-reliance, and the capacity to live fully with all your constructive patterns beginning to work is ample compensation for all the years of destructive and unproductive living, as well as for the pain of crossing the threshold into emotional adulthood. So there is so much to me in this paragraph, because the way I see is here, the whole thing pretty much is like, we try to avoid, it's the lack of wanting to, it's the not wanting to assume self-responsibility for all this pain and for all these, the pain and confusions and things that we experience as a child. So we use all these methods to escape from facing, from taking that responsibility and facing that pain. So to me, my life, I have found that escaping and resistance are really the two big things for me. And it's like I cannot number the way, to be honest, that I have employed in my life to escape facing, this issue, to escape experiencing this pain, to escape, crossing this threshold. So it's just incredible. But to me, I keep focusing my own work. I keep focusing very much on whenever I find myself trying to escape or trying to resist, not facing the reality of now, not facing what I feel, and really finding way, even subconsciously to a great degree, trying to escape from facing this pain. There is numberless the way that I can think that I find every day way to resist and way to escape from facing these pains in this reality. So that's what I'm working on right now, and I thank you, Alan, again, and Tracy very much for selecting this lecture, because it's really helped me to see a lot through it, and really work and go deep into it, and I have come to, at least to 2 or 3 breakthroughs just by reading and and experiencing, diving deep into this lecture. So again, thank you very much, and thank you all for your sharing, because it all, one way or another, shed light into the light that I feel that I need to to keep expanding and growing and maturing in this spiritual path. So again, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Juan.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, Juan. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Juan.
Oh, my pleasure always. Thank you all. Thank you all. You guys were all great. That's what it is. It's a great thing about this group. It's like we are learning so much from each other, and every little bit that we pitch in, it's just like kind of like makes the whole, So it's very fascinating and so interesting. Thank you all.
Does anyone else have insights they'd like to share?
Well, maybe I could say something.
Sure.
I'm here thinking about how much we are identified with this immature child self, right? That we, because these pseudo solutions were strategies of our inner child once, and we're still doing it, still manipulating people into doing what we should be taking care of our child. And here we are, either by aggression, submission, or even withdrawal. We are here, do it for me, like demanding the world to give me validation, recognition, admiration, whatever. See me, hey, I'm here, can see me, like we're all doing. And it's that's why we cannot give, because we are still saying, you owe me, the world owes me. I didn't get that back in 19 whatever. Come on, what I'm not to give yet. I'm still my turn to receive.
Mhm.
Well, why give? Why are guys talking about? I'm not ready for that. People still owe me. And even I don't know. Well, and on another totally different note, Wikipedia is done by crowd community sourcing, so we can have our own thing there. It's not that they don't think we're a Pathwork is important, it's that nobody from the Pathwork had the idea of writing there. Any of us can start an article.
Wikipedia, somebody has.
Well, I'm not, I know how Wikipedia works. As a matter of fact, though, there was an entry for Eva Caracas that they took down.
There is one in Brazil, in Portuguese. It's still there.
Because in Wikipedia in English, there was a Eva Paraka's article that they took it down because they considered her to be not notable. In other words, there wasn't enough documentation about her life to establish that she really was a prominent person. Which is kind of
I don't know. It's just because it is in the Brazilian site.
see how interesting. That's good to know. That's good to know.
Alan, I left you a note in the chat about the Wikipedia. I've done it before. So if you want to do, I think you would be fabulous. You're the one that should put it up there. And I know that I'm guessing, but I think I know that they will put it up. You just have to register that you're going to do it.
All right.
It's easy to do. Yeah.
That is a thought.
Okay.
Rita, how are you?
Good, good to see you and everybody.
Hi, Rita.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for picking this lecture. I was noticing in the question and answer part, Alan, thank you for giving such a great summary. There was a question from somebody there that you said in the last lecture that the effect of one person being in truth is of greater cosmic importance than we can possibly realize. Can you explain this? And the guide talks about it. Basically, all the same that was said earlier, how being aggressively arrogant and denying one's own needs is rejecting the other person outright, withdrawal, never giving warmth, never fulfills the other person's needs. What I wonder, isn't there a time and a place for everything?
The Bible says that, right?
Undo all things. There is a season.
A season.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a interesting question.
We don't necessarily want to be giving an open without discernment, right? Isn't discernment one of the important concepts? Because that's self-responsibility too, right?
I was going to say, one of the things that I have really been thinking about a lot and realized, over time, is that it's not really the action itself, but it's what the intention behind it is. So, you say, you're withholding. Well, if you're withholding, because the intention is you don't want to give love, you're protecting yourself from pain or whatever, that's one thing. But if you're withholding because you're being loving in some way, because the other person will benefit if you withhold, then it's not the action itself, it's the intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's how I think of that, because it's tricky.
It is tricky.
Like you're saying, like you shouldn't be giving people some, like this unending flow of, gifts or, yourself to the detriment of your own self. That wouldn't be loving.
But the intention is a very, very difficult concept to decipher. I mean, we all know that we are hurting others because of our own pain. Not so there are different levels of intentions.
Right.
And
Yes.
That's how it gets.
so it's very, very hard.
That's
to
why the
understand.
biggest gift you can give is truthfulness.
Yeah.
Because then you expose the different levels, which helps the people see, and you're able then to see yourself what your intentions are. I mean, the guide always says that, we have many different parts of ourselves in conflict with other parts. There are less developed parts of the personality and more highly developed parts. So.
Yeah, I'd like to add or to say something to what Rita mentioned, especially about the word discernment, because this was an excellent word, Rita. I want to say that as you experience the way that feels most naturally in your essence to express love, to express your essence, to express your clean energy of, the universal self through you, Okay. Some people are here and are called to be here in order to express that naturally through discernment, or to learn how to express that through discernment on their path in this incarnation. And so, you know, that type of person, let's just say, will have his life goal in order to find ways in order to do that, to separate the good from the bad, to say, you know what, that's the kind of thing that works in my life, that's the kind of thing that doesn't, and vice versa. You know, stand up for yourself, have the courage to move forward in life, things like that. Now, on the opposite side of discernment, there are many here as well who seek to express essence in terms of the opposite of discernment, which would be acceptance. Okay, and acceptance being, okay, I can relate to you, I can connect with you, I don't need to push discernment into a given scenario, let's just say. And so their task is many times saying yes to things that they really want to say no to, but they're almost called to figure out a way to find acceptance in their life for difficult situations, right? And like I said, if your task is more discernment, it can be the opposite. It could be, instead of saying, well, you know what, yeah, acceptance is great, but I need to find a way to stand up for my own respect and not give it away, okay, in this situation, or to stand up for someone else who's weaker, right? So there are times, just like Tracy was saying, or I think Alan said, that, you know, there's a time and a place for everything. Well, I would even say there's a lifetime for everything, okay? That in my experience, right, a given lifetime will have a goal to achieve. In other teachings, like the Michael teachings, it's about going to your lighthouse in this lifetime. And there's nothing that your personality or your overleaves or whatever the teachings are that overlay the essence. In fact, even in Pathwork, I think it's in the 200s somewhere, there's the whole concept of the life task. Okay, and it talks, Ava or the guide talks about that life task in context of a given single life, and that within that, you know, your essence or your higher self is really kind of pulling some strings along the way in order for you to get into those like little nitty-gritty areas that you really needed to work on. And for some, God bless them, it's discernment. And for others, it's, you know, other things, okay? Some it's just going with the flow of life and seeing how to balance it out, right? It's not all of one or all of the other. So there, I mean, at least in my experience, you know, it's not necessarily a pathwork concept, but, you know, there's as much as 7 energies of the divine that's manifested into the personality structure and the life task. And so in that way, it helps give acceptance to, there's a certain level of acceptance in everything, right? So there's a way to rationalize and see and to understand and to feel and to experience different people, and not necessarily have to have everybody have the same lesson because they can't. And that was part of my journey growing up, Rita, was that I got so indoctrinated in a sense that there was one right way to live your life. Okay, and it's such bullshit. Okay, it's such utter bullshit. But it was part of that education process that I kind of just I wanted to just, you know, get into the flow of something and just then be left alone and go away and just get the answers to life, right? But life doesn't show up that way for me sometimes. It wants to come up in my face and say, hey, reevaluate what's going on, buddy. You know, so, you know, I just wanted to share that because you really helped me to remember those 2 points there and hopefully give to the group a little bit of my perspective, okay?
Thanks, Kevin.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. That was wonderful. That was a wide ranging and very, very deep. Joel, would you like to take the
Yeah.
take the
the
comment?
mic.
Oh, too many people are standing up.
Hi, everybody again. The one paragraph, and I read the 96 edition, that really struck in my mind. It was toward the beginning of the lecture, and the guide was talking about the fact that while we may think that it was, you know, a seriously traumatic event that around which we created our defenses and our images, and that while this is as painful as this might have been, that it's actually the small ways in which we adapted ourselves to survive what we felt was survive as children that are even more impactful of our experience today, which I'm still having a difficult time with, because in the society in which we live, and particularly in psychology, how its approach, that we tend to focus on how injured have we been and who suffered the greatest injury. And then we identify the different ways in which we have been injured and compare each other. And we withdraw from one another to varying degrees, depending on the extent to which we've defined that injury, whatever that may be. But the guide is saying to us that more than that, it's the little ways of the variety of images and defenses that we've adapted in order to live, that this is where we must turn our focus. And I don't mean to diminish the work that needs to be done on these significant traumas, and I don't think that the guide is suggesting that, but it was just really, I just paused when I read that, because it kind of turns the standard way of thinking on its head. And then, I think what the guide is trying to do is really point us toward looking at these small adaptations that we've made without even realizing it. I mean, when I start to think about this, my God, what little ways have I done to undermine myself, my experience of this moment, the reality of this moment. And I'm going to be working on this for a long time. But I think the encouraging thing about this is to suggest that, yes, we need to heal the deep traumas, but we also need to look at these other ways that we're causing ourselves to not really live in the moment, in this moment.
Yeah, Joel, would you call that the veil or the illusion that we tend to set up for ourselves, which then we miss what's really happening or what really life is present for us?
I think we need to find that their own way. When I think of the veil, I think of the veil between life and death, between life and the eternal. So, but if that's a term that works for you to explain this, to kind of group it, to get a handle on it, and I think that's wonderful, right? I mean, it's just so. I almost don't even know where to begin with this when I think about the little adaptations and adjustments that images, patterns that took me out of being true to myself and being myself, right?
Right.
So I'm going to be working on this.
Yeah. Have you, Joel, have you experienced them as sort of like a tree with, if you have searched through them, do you see them connected? And or are there different roots, or are they all coming from a similar trunk?
Oh my God, I haven't even got to that point. I mean, I think what the guide is saying to us is that we have made so many adaptations to avoid pain, right? Whatever that, the pain of loneliness, of separation, of rejection, disappointment. Tracy's thrown it. Maybe you want to comment, Tracy.
I was just thinking when I read this lecture how it reminded me of kids on a playground. In its essence, some kid gets their feelings hurt and then they say, I don't want to play with you anyway. And they take their red ball and they go home. That's their pseudo solution. And meanwhile, everybody's lost. They're upset because they're not playing with the kid on the playground. The kid on the playground is now upset because the other kids said something mean and gone home with the red ball. So until we get to the point where we really can get out of a victim consciousness and realize what we did to bring about maybe that somebody doesn't want to play with or whatever, you can't begin to unravel the knot. And it takes a lifetime because we are so programmed to be in a victim mentality. I think at some level, there's some kind of comfort in being a victim. You know, it's like, oh, life did me a dirty, this person did me a dirty, that person disappointed me. And you can sort of sit back and like blame everything. And you don't have to do anything because you haven't done anything wrong. Everybody else, and life included, and society, and the virus, and you know, and everything, you know, the vaccine, I mean, whatever you want to throw into that has somehow disappointed you, not lived up to what you need. And it really just starts. I mean, I remember being on a playground and engaging in this behavior continuously because I always had this feeling that I wasn't liked, that I wasn't popular. So in order to protect myself from the cool girls rejecting me, I would reject them first. Probably everybody's done it. We're probably all the, you know, doing it to everybody else and ourselves, but which is one of the reasons I really like this lecture, because when you strip it down and take it to its very simple message, it really does just go back to very childlike behavior that we all engage in starting as children and carry with us through our adult years as means to protect ourselves from being hurt. And all we're doing is not only not protecting ourselves, we're actually hurting ourselves more, and we're hurting others in the process. So we're creating this very almost snowball chain reaction that's augmenting rather than minimizing the pain that we're fleeing from.
Well, it is also nice and constructive that the guide really kind of really puts the concept of childhood trauma in a different text, in a different context, right? I mean, saying not that we're a prisoner of it, but that we recreate those traumas in what we do to ourselves today, right now. So it kind of takes the power away from this concept of childhood trauma in a good way. And I also feel that we respond, like when you were talking, Joel, I think about the kind of feeling of timelessness that we get from the lectures. You know, that there really is no time. Time doesn't really exist. What happened in childhood, it's sort of present with us now. And who we are now is present with us now. And whatever we choose to do happens in a different dimension. I mean, I think at some point the guide said that prayer takes effect when it is meant to. In other words, if you pray for somebody and they don't need the prayer now, they'll get the energy when they need it, which kind of indicates that time really doesn't exist, right? Because, you know, whatever you put out has an effect and a value and a meaning.
Alan, is that in the lectures? That's
I believe it is in one of the lectures somewhere.
Concept. I haven't heard of that one.
Because the guide talks about prayer, and the guide, of course, says that intercessory prayer isn't a good thing, is not significant, doesn't work. You don't pray for God to do something, because we are the active agents that have to make things better. We can pray for the strength to do something. You know, we can pray for the strength to make the right choices, but you know, you're not going to say, "Oh God, you know, please make my mother well," or, you know, "Please give me a good job." The intercessory prayer, where you pray for something to happen miraculously, is not a valid prayer, the guide says, because it neglects our own causal ability to change things and create reality ourselves. It takes responsibility away from us. That's a digression, though.
I'd just like to add one thing in terms of adulthood and children. I think we don't do this consciously at all, but we don't want to grow up. There's a part of us, and I'm thinking of us as human beings. I'm not even thinking of us as individuals. But as human beings, and of course, growing up means that we take responsibility pretty much for everything. But we don't want to grow up. We want somebody else, or I'll do a little bit, but not all of it. Adulthood is a wonderful concept that I don't think we actually deal with properly. you know, that a full, I want to become, somebody asked me, what do you want? What's your goal? And my goal is really to become an adult, to really take responsibility and have the feeling that I can handle whatever comes at me. I may not handle it properly or whatever, but I know I'll do it. I'll do my best with whatever's thrown at me or pleasantly comes my way. I just wanted to say that I do think I would like to be an adult, and I'm working on it.
I'll be an adult when I grow up, right?
I didn't hear you. What?
I'll be an adult when I grow up.
Well, that's well, that's
said.
the whole point. That's exactly the point. The growing up is the hard part. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kay. And you know, for years, this lecture brought so many things. The first one actually is what you're saying. That's why I wanted to intercept that. For years and years and years and years, I remember clearly and vividly, I would push away growing up. Like I would like, no, I don't want to go there. No, you know, because it was too much. It was too much responsibility. It was too much probably pain from the childhood. It was just too much to really deal with this. Like I am the cause and I am, you know, competent enough to handle it. So I pushed it away for years and years. And now when I study pathwork and other things, I actually want to grow up. I want to grow up because I want that relationship with divine. And I know it can only come from the hunger and from me really, like the lecturer is saying, doing the action, walking the walk. So I realized I can't do it alone. I'm not strong enough, but it's the faith that grows me up, saying, I want to live through intuition and I will be done and I want to surrender and I want to be led. But in order to do that, I have to meditate and I have to open up and I have to become a grown-up. So this is like the first year in my life, and I've been around for a while, that I want to grow up. And the reason why I want to grow up, maybe it's the seclusion, maybe it's the isolation, also is the post-COVID weakness that I still have, but it's the realization I am not strong enough on my own, but there is something stronger and I can lean on it. And the only way to get to that power is to surrender, but through a real contact, through meditation, to really feeling that connection. You know what I mean? So this is the first in my life, actually, that just happened days ago, that I want to grow up because I realize life is fleeing. I'm getting older. The body is not as youthful, resilient, and strong. I need something beyond all of that. I need it. I need to feel it. I really need that support. And I just realized it's the connection with God, the personal connection, the personal connection that's led through the intuition, and it downloads to me in a large part in meditation. So that was my first realization. Then I wanted to go back to that part that the guy is talking about the pain. That was, I think, in the answer part where somebody asked about fear, and he says the fear is just a cover for the deeper rooted pain. And I actually wanted to say this is completely genius, because I was listening to this lecture today after work, walking through a beautiful park, looking at flowers. And I finished the lecture, like an hour into my walk. Then I decided to walk some more, and I put on my favorite Pandora station. And I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I know I have childhood problems, but I'm all right. You know, I see the defenses. It's aggression, but I'm okay. And then Basia started singing. I don't know if you know Basia. She's a Polish singer that sings in English. She's a pop singer. She's very good. And she sang in English this beautiful song. And then she sang a sentence in Polish. And the whole hell broke loose. And I started crying uncontrollably, looking at beautiful flowers in the park, saying, oh my God, that childhood pain. What did I go through? And the sobbing that I went through and the pain was unbearable. And I'm like, oh, that is true, you know? It's the pain that blocks, that's so deep that I go into fear, I go into aggression, I go into withdrawal, I go into all these other defenses because the pain is not resolved. But because I just read the lecture and I was relaxed, you know, looking at these flowers, it's Friday, I'm done with work, that pain hit me like a tons of bricks. Just hearing this Polish language brought all my childhood back. And also she's got this very nurturing, beautiful energy when she sings. Oh my God, I started sobbing in this park like crazy, saying, this is all true. It's all a cover for a deep pain. And if we can just feel that pain, this thing is gonna crumble, you know, in a way that the defense is gonna start crumbling, because that's the cover. All of this, the fear, the lying, the pretending, the perfectionistic, you know, everything like that is to cover that pain, I think. And when this is unexpected and the pain shot through, I'm like, yep, that's what it is. That's what it is. But it's hard to bring about that pain. So I think what I'm going to start doing is really observing myself in those behaviors, which I have perfect examples at work because it's a crazy ad agency and I'm triggered all the time. So I can just observe it and see, you know, why can't I just feel that pain instead? Why can't I just connect this to the deeper pain and just not act up? But this is what I wanted to share, that pain is, and also this lecture very, very clearing for me. It like deep cleansing, because once you understand all these concepts, then you know it's hope. And there's a hope for like having a normal life, feeling the pain, crying, just being yourself, you know, doing what we could not do as children growing up with dysfunctional people. But we can do this now with ourselves. But I'm ready to grow up. This is the first I ever felt I'm ready to grow up, Kate. And this just came like a few days ago. Yeah, yeah, I think finally I'm getting ready for that.
Yay.
Yeah, go ahead, Joel. Quick question. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was the last lecture where the guide was talking about the nature of pain and spoke to the fact that it's related to our fear around death. That underlying all pain is the fear of death. Is that the last lecture? And that until we come to terms with that, that's what's really underlying pain. And so that once we accept death, come to terms with that, then the pain will lessen. So that pain manifests in these different ways. Oh my God, I'm going to get the virus, right? But what's really underlying that is that I haven't accepted my own death. The other thing I wanted to say was that it's implied in this lecture, and it just came to me tonight, which is this tremendous belief in our capacity to transform ourselves, to explain to all of us that no matter what the accumulated expenses, do it. I think it's my phone.
Sorry about that. Go ahead, Joel.
Joe, we can hardly hear you.
This belief in us, in our.
We can hardly hear you.
Yeah, maybe Joel, you can restate it. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Just my final point after, you know, where is the pain coming from, right? And so that's this fear of death, and the extent to which we have or haven't come to terms with that, that's underlying all fears. But then what came to me while we were talking tonight is the guide's tremendous affirmation of our capacity to grow and to change and to withstand being in the pain of the child, that we can do this, and that we're going to be okay, and that we may not even have a clear way, but just recognizing that we want something more, we want something different, we want to find our way out of the wilderness, that it will happen.
Just to add to what Alan was saying about the different stages of prayer, or also the intercessory prayer as a preliminary stage of requesting from the universe or from God for a given item. I just recently listened to it, Alan. So thank you for reminding me of that. It was Pathwork Lecture 105, and there's questions 2 and 3 within that lecture, which just are phenomenal. And I would encourage everyone just to review those questions. They're short, they're to the point, but they're amazing.
Thank you, Kevin. That's a deep question about the fear of death, and a fear. God often says, you know, you're afraid of death and afraid of life. It's the same thing. Right? Now, would anyone like to ask for spiritual force and strength to overcome a particular fault or issue they're dealing with? You know, we used to do this back in the guides' day with the force, where it was a beautiful thing. You know, after a lecture, the guide would ask if anyone wants to receive the force, which was a kind of spiritual, powerful energy that the guide would raise her hands, you know, his hands, and give this kind of strength to anybody who would come forward. And that's really what I think of when I think about prayer. I think that it is a channeling of energy, really. So I thought it would be a nice idea if anyone feels like asking for a blessing for a particular fault or problem or task that they're undergoing or undertaking. You don't have to say what it is, or you can if you want to. But I just thought it might be nice if anyone feels that they would like to ask for that.
Yeah, could I ask for a couple of my family members that are going through some traumatic times right now, that everyone just help channel this energy together? Did you hear? Did anyone hear?
I did, yes, Kevin.
I heard you, Kevin.
All right, just making
Yes.
sure.
No, I would certainly like to do that.
Thank you.
You're asking for sort of spiritual strength to be channeled for them?
Yeah, for a few of my, let's say for a few of my family members. I'd like to keep it somewhat anonymous at this point, but if you could just hold a few family members within your heart and help channel the divine influx into, let's say, my family or my extended family, in order to heal some of these difficulties that are presently.
Let's send our love and energy to Kevin.
I guess I would like to ask also for this energy to be sent specifically to my sister and to my mother. I think, I mean, we all need it, but I think specifically at this point of their lives, they can definitely use lots of divine help. So I would like to, you know, to send the energy to them, if you could. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Juan. All right, my friends, we'll have a meditation now. So a 10-minute meditation, meditating on what we've understood from the lecture. Meditate to meet the pain of our destructive patterns, to understand that pain. And I'll read that brief paragraph. Okay. Some of you have actually reached the threshold, opening the way to a new inner life of being emotionally willing to let go of all the defenses. Constantly observing your unrealistic and immature emotions and reactions weakens their impact. It begins a process of dissolving them almost automatically. When a certain dissolution has taken place, the psyche is ready to cross the threshold. But the act of crossing is painful in the beginning. But I pray that we all may feel the defenses dissolving and the destructive patterns weakening and constructive patterns taking their place. All right, so we'll have a 10-minute meditation, friends.